So, Echo Charles, what do you got? Question number 1. Go.
All right. Okay, first question. Jocko, how did you have time to train in martial arts while deployed? I figure that you were too busy with combat to even think about training while deployed. Thank you for any information.
Okay, so a couple things. I always brought mats with me when we deployed. And it was really good, because once I was in a leadership position, I could kind of make that happen pretty easily.
Wait, how does that happen? Do you just say, hey, bring some mats? Do you tell somebody?
I had mats. No, I had mats, and I actually got mats from the team. And then we would just put them on a big pallet. When you deploy, you go on, you put all your gear on these big pallets. So some of those pallets would have mats on them.
Mats. Well, okay,
and then when we would go on deployment, now pre-war, it was, we'd go on deployment, we'd just bring mats and train wherever we could train. And then once the war started, and I still brought mats. I was like, hey, war? It's not like they're going to have us working 24 hours a day. So, and if they did, we just wouldn't be able to train, but I was prepared for training. And what I did, both my deployments to Iraq, is I had what's called a GP medium tent, which is basically a really, really big tent. And they have air conditioning and they have dual walls, so it stays kind of cool. And I just made that into a little mini fight room, put mats out. And then I would just train when there was downtime. And there is downtime when you're on deployment. I mean, there is definitely downtime when you're on deployment. And like, what are you going to do with your downtime is the question. Now, some guys with their downtime, they decide to do something that's maybe not super productive. And I'll give you an example of that. There was some guys on my first deployment to Iraq, and they played Halo. It's a video game. Have you heard of it?
Yes.
Okay. It's a first-person shooter video game.
Yeah.
And so my guys they just played anytime we weren't working, which, our missions at that point, we're doing little direct action missions. They'd only take a few hours, even, the planning and, every 2 or 3 days. So you had time, right? And so all the time, and they had wires set up so they could play different each other in different tents. Yeah, it was really ridiculous. And meanwhile, the guys that were a little bit more hardcore, we were training in the jiu-jitsu, but these guys, and actually these guys were good mugs too. But what's funny is, so I kind of thought, like, what is wrong with these guys? Why are they doing this? But whatever. And then all of a sudden they had the group above us, the group that was in charge of the SEALs that were there. It's called the CJSOTF, the Combined Joint Special Operations Task Force. That group, they hosted a Halo tournament. Nice. Like, in all the different special operations groups went and did this Halo tournament. Okay. And I don't know if I'm proud of this or not proud of this, but 2 of my guys that entered the tournament, they won. But not only did they win, I guess the way you play Halo, you can die multiple times. And so after a certain number of times, like, you play to a certain number of deaths, I guess. But anyways, in the finals, these 2 guys beat the other guys that were from some army group or something. They beat them 50 deaths to 2. So I was just saying to myself, really? So anyways, the next deployment, guys were playing some other, I don't play video games, but the other guys played when we were in Ramadi, guys were playing, I want to say John Madden football.
That's a good one.
Yeah. See, I don't know, because I don't play video games.
Tekken.
Echo Charles. But what I was doing during those downtimes is, yes, bring mats and train jiu-jitsu. And there's always guys, even though there'd be plenty of guys playing video games, and we'd train jiu-jitsu for sure. And you should make time for it, because you know what? You think about being under a stressful situation. Well, what's going to help you with a stressful situation? A physical outlet, a little mental break. And guess what? Guess what gives you a physical outlet and gives you a mental break? Doing some jiu-jitsu. So, of course, there's times where we'd go in the field, or we'd have multiple back-to-back operations, and we wouldn't be able to train. No big deal. Of course, the job takes the total priority over it. But, yeah, so I would always train. And I'll tell you one more thing. When I would go on deployment, like, let's say you're a guy that trains and you go on deployment, well, there's going to be somebody that will train with you. Even if they're never trained before, somebody's going to go, yeah, I'll train with you. Yeah. And those guys, that happened to me, where I went on deployment with a bunch of guys that didn't know anything. and I just was teaching them. And when I came back from a 6-month deployment, this is before the war, I was definitely way better than I was before I left. So even though I was only training with guys that were not even close to as good as me, just training all the time and just going with guys, you know, strong, tough team guys made me better. And when I got back, I had improved a lot in comparison with the guys that I was training with before I left that were training all the time while I was gone. So you can make improvement even if you just have bodies to move around and you can focus on your offense, you can put yourself in bad positions. So there's a bunch of ways to get better while you're doing it. So yeah, man, you can train on deployment for sure. We just had a couple guys come back from deployment from the Marine Corps, and you know they were out on a shipboard deployment. They trained all the time. You know, they just came back to Victory MMA, and they've been training the whole time. They got good too. They improved their game a lot.
Yeah, I seen guys train. I think it was Army guys. They were training, and they train with the jacket on, and they use the jacket as the gi.
For sure.
Different, but kind of the same.
Oh yeah, it's the same. We, and I've done that too. In fact, the early days of jiu-jitsu for me, that's why when no gi started getting popular, I kind of knew no gi because we used to train in BDU pants, so like camouflage pants and a t-shirt. That sort of seemed like a good compromise.
Sure.
And plus Dean and I trained no gi a lot, even though Dean was training no gi because he wrestled and then
wasn't he doing MMA and stuff too? Right?
What he did no gi way before he did MMA.
Oh,
we were training no gi. I don't even know what. I'll have to ask Dean where the idea came because even in Sambo you wear a jacket, right?
Right. Yeah, on the top.
And he was a Sambo guy too.
Interesting. Do you guys go like all when you train? Like, hey, I'm just one of the team guys. I don't train jiu-jitsu, and you're like, hey, let's go train. What do you do? Full on training, like for 6, 8-minute rounds, or what do you do?
It's the same thing. I mean, I've talked about it before. Like, I would get guys that were training, even if they're a lower level, and I would just train with all of them and just line them up and go. Yeah. And then they'd be training with each other too, and I would teach little classes and say, hey, this is how you do this, and you know me, I kind of like to roll more, but so I would always end up rolling a lot, but. You get good, tough team guys that wrestled or they're a high school wrestler or they did judo. So there's guys and they always bring it. It's always good training with them.
Yeah, and they're moving. They're, they're not like...
And they got great cardio and they're strong. Oh, yeah. And then, anytime there was Marines around or soldiers around, there were some Rangers down the street from me. I trained with a few of those guys a couple times. So, yeah, man, getting after it. You can definitely... You got to find a way to do it, and then you make time to do it.